Well, I'm Jack Hayes with Westwood Professional Services, and this is Brad from Ecos Energy. They are the developer and owner of the Slayton project, and we help them on the solar design, survey work, civil work, you name it. We were kind of there to help those guys out. So tonight, we'll just kind of do a quick review of the project and just field everybody's questions. Project partners, as I mentioned, Ecos Energy was the developer and they're the project owner. We did project design, construction management. Blattner Energy out of Avon was the general contractor, and the project is interconnected with Xcel Energy. The project is located in the city of Slayton. It's in Murray County, sort of southwest, I guess you could say Minnesota. It's about 14 acres in size. 2 megawatts DC power, 1.66 AC. The array just generally is broken up into 4 smaller arrays, 2 500 kilowatt arrays and 2 333 kilowatt arrays. Total of 7,000 modules, 35-degree tilt rack, so pretty standard tilt for the location. And we are interconnected to Xcel Energy at a nearby substation, and I'll show you a couple pictures of that. The energy is sold to Xcel, estimate about 2,800 megawatt hours a year, and this was a Renewable Development Fund project, so the project is partially funded by Xcel Energy. Just a quick overview of the construction schedule. The electrical and civil design was completed in about February of last year. The interconnection design, so the period of time when Westwood and Ecos were working together with Xcel to finalize all those details about how we were going to get our power over to their substation, that was finished about a month later. During the summer, we finalized all of our procurement, got all of our modules, all of our inverters, the racking, all of that put together. Construction started in September of last year, and the project was commissioned in December of last year, and I believe the official active date was about the first week of January.
Exactly right, January 4th.
So the modules we used were 285 watt modules. That's a 72 cell module, so a larger format. There's 7,040 units. These are oriented in portrait, so they're just kind of stacked one on top of one another. Like I said, we have 4 inverters out there, 2 500 kilowatt units and 2 333 kilowatt units. They put out 480 VAC straight to the transformer, which steps it up to 13 kV for interconnection to Xcel Energy. This whole system is mounted on a skid here. It's got piers driven into the ground, and this skid holds the 4 inverters, holds the transformers, holds a couple switchboards, and it holds all of the monitoring equipment in there as well. The racking, again, is a 35-degree tilt rack, and I'll have a couple of pictures of the installation coming up here. Combiner box, pretty straightforward. We use 16 and 24 string combiner boxes, and I'll show you how those went together. These are disconnecting combiner boxes, so you can walk out to the field and turn off that particular section of the array if you need to. The transformer, as I said, steps up power to interconnection voltage with Xcel Energy. This is a distribution substation, so the power was interconnected at 13 kV. And this is just a nice picture of the switchgear out front. So the transformer, I've got a picture of the layout coming up, sends power out to the switchgear. This has a couple cabinets on it. One cabinet is Ecos's cabinet, has their metering and equipment in it, and the other one is for Xcel Energy and all their equipment, all of their monitoring and SCADA equipment. And then from here, it travels out to the road, bores underneath the road, and then goes underground to the Xcel substation, which you can kind of see is right behind over there.
You go to 13 at the inverters. 13 comes to this interconnection.
Yep. 482 from the inverters to the transformer, and then 13
Transformers on the inverter skid.
transformers on the skid. Yep. So here's a little layout of the array to show you guys. Here's the inverter skid right here is where the inverters and transformers are. They feed power out to here, which is the switchgear unit. Crosses 91st Street here and comes down to the XL Energy substation. This kind of gives you a general outline of the property. So we spaced these rows for standard morning shading, so 9 to 3 winter solstice. Each one of these rows has a combiner box on the end of it, so we have 16, 16, 16, all the way down for the first 2 subarrays, and then 24 around these second 2 subarrays. So this is 500 kilowatts, 500, 333, and 333. Also on this unit we have all of our monitoring equipment, so there's some weather station equipment out there as well, and you can kind of faintly see the DC trench coming up along the road here into here, and then coming into the skid there as well.
How many modules per string?
I believe it was 11. It's a 600.
Is it 600 volts?
It's a 600 volt system.
Bipolar system.
Correct.
Is it bipolar with the full neutral, or is it bipolar with the reduced?
It's full. Yeah.
So your neutral's coming back out pretty big wires. Or
Yeah.
Your common's coming back out pretty big wires.
Right. Yeah, the common is correct. Here's just a few pictures from our construction. This is all Blattner's fine work here. Just a picture of the underside of their tray here, and their wire management. A picture that shows them laying out the racks. Westwood did the construction staking, so we basically had a unit that had GPS on it that we could accurately locate every single one of these piles out in the field. We have this pile pounding equipment, which drives these posts straight into the ground. There's no concrete or anything. They're just driven straight in. This has a laser level on it, and part of our task was to figure out exactly how far out of the ground each one of these posts needed to be. So that was programmed into the equipment, and basically that machine would read out for each post. It knew which post it was pounding in, and it would stop at the exact point where it was supposed to.
Would you recommend a Vermeer PD10 for any installation like this?
Say that again?
Would you recommend a Vermeer PD10 for any installation like this?
I can't say I wasn't doing the construction on it, but Blattner seemed to be very happy with it.
We've done a number of projects using a few different pieces of equipment. I don't certainly know all of the options, but for the Slayton project, that piece of equipment did work very well.
Did I understand you correctly? The thing's got a GPS accurate enough to place the string and laser?
Westwood staked every pole out here, so we put little stakes in the ground to tell Blattner where to put those piles. And so we had our survey crew go out there and stake every location, and then Blattner came back and located the piles at each stake, and they knew whether to put the pile on top of the stake or a certain distance away from the stake each time. One of our other tasks, which becomes very necessary with larger PV systems that have PPAs, is commissioning. So one of our tasks from ECOS was to, after Blattner was already done with the project, to go back out there and test certain kinds of equipment to make sure everything was tied down properly, and make sure everything was functioning as it was supposed to. So part of that included very simple tests like torque testing the the MC4 connectors between the modules, and part of it was doing IV curve testing on the strings themselves. So we would go open the combiner box, put our testers on the positive and negative bus bars of the combiner box, and basically open each string one by one and check for proper voltage and current. And there's a quick picture of the finished array.
It looks like the pilings went down 12 feet, 15 feet?
Embedment was 11 feet at this site. And there's all sorts of structural geotech calculations that go into figuring out how much steel needs to be beneath the ground. Obviously, we want to minimize that as much as possible. 11 feet is what we got for the Slate project.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah.
Few hands here.
All the cornfields in Minnesota, how come in Slayton, why was that locations?
Sure. As Jack mentioned earlier, the project is partially funded by an RDF grant. The original RDF grant proposal was to locate a solar project in an area where there was also a significant amount of wind power. Down southwestern Minnesota, obviously Buffalo Ridge, lots of wind down there. The idea was to take a look at the production curves, different times of day, different times of year, to see if wind and solar might complement each other. Possibly when wind isn't generating quite as much, it might be a better time for solar. And when solar's dipping down a little bit, like in the winter, wind's picking up. And so the idea was to get a project in place in an area where Excel can take a long-term look at the production profiles to see if the two technologies really do complement each other well in Minnesota. So that really focused the search on the Buffalo Ridge area. From there, it's basically finding a community that was in Excel service territory. And if you've seen Excel service territory map down in that area of the state, it's very spotty. Lots of little islands of Excel service rather than a big block. Once those communities are identified, then it's just a matter of finding a location where Excel has both capacity and load on a particular circuit that would allow a project like this to go in without having to bring transmission into it. And Slayton was the right fit.
Can you talk about the project economics? What is the cost of electricity coming out of there? Who's the manufacturer of the panels and what type they are?
Sure. I do appreciate the question. For anyone that didn't hear, just asking for some details on project economics, manufacturer-specific details. I can't really get into a lot of that. It's going to be proprietary, confidential information. The project does generate a positive financial return for its investors, and we feel it also creates a positive benefit for the ratepayers of the state of Minnesota, as kind of shown in our RDF report. As far as specific, cost information, unfortunately I can't really share that, but I do appreciate the question.
I'd say, how much power can you get? Like, how many homes, how big a city can you power with this?
Sure. This project will generate on an annual basis about enough power to offset 240 to 280 homes usage throughout the year. I believe that's the number we've been seeing based upon the production we've seen already since the project went live in January.
Approximately how much of the overall project cost, though, was underwritten by the grant from Renewable Development Fund? Is that part of Excel?
Sure. So I'm not completely up to date on exactly the relationship between the RDF and Excel. Obviously, the RDF is tied to Excel, but my understanding is that it's operated as a totally separate entity. The amount of the grant is public information. It was $2 million. As far as the percentage of the total project costs, again, I got to keep that confidential.
Is any of the non-confidential information, are you willing to share with the MRES so we can look at it?
Well, I want to share as much information as I can with you guys, but information about costs, financials, that kind of stuff, unfortunately, that's going to be proprietary.
PowerPoint, for instance?
What's that?
A copy of the PowerPoint, can you share with?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you talk some about the construction phase and how big were your crews? Like how many people were involved? 3 months seems like a pretty short time frame trying to get it to megawatts, so you must be a lot of
The,
people there.
the crews were smaller than you would think. Blattner ran maybe a maximum of 20 people at a time. The nice thing about these types of projects, the ground mount level, they really are extremely simple to construct. You dig your trench, you pound your piles, you assemble the racking, you add the modules. We chose to go with a pre-integrated equipment skid, so that just comes off of the back of a truck, drops into place, and boom, it's ready to go. And the construction activities are very straightforward and very easy to manage. 3 months was a extremely comfortable time frame that allowed Blattner to run a smaller type of crew than having to have 40 or 50 guys out there at a time running into each other. This project, you could have done it in a month and a half with a bigger crew if you'd have absolutely had to.
This is another financial question, but hopefully a public knowledge type thing.
Sure.
My experience is that wind, usually there's a common depreciation value you can use on wind turbines and equipment.
Mhm.
Is there anything like that developing for solar, or do you guys happen to use anything to estimate the depreciation?
There are a couple different depreciation models that can be used, and I know it is a factor in the long-term project financing. That's a question that I can't share because I just don't have all the answers on that one, unfortunately.
Does something exist that?
Yes, the equipment can be depreciated, and I think I've heard that certain types of solar equipment are eligible for certain types of accelerated depreciation.
That's right.
Fortunately, that's not my particular area of expertise, so I wish I had a better answer for you.
It is, oh, got an answer for him. Hi. Yeah.
No, I think, I heard that Westwood had a project about the same size on a landfill site, but this is not a landfill site, is that right?
No, this is a retired cornfield, yeah.
Okay, and.
Is that right? Cornfield, yeah.
I mean, it seems to me that it would be even better to put it somewhere where, use crop plan for it.
Sure.
Is that part of the site selection process, or that wasn't
Yeah.
necessary?
I'll say first that that landfill project has not yet been built.
Yeah.
It's still under advisement, I guess you could say, but hasn't quite happened yet.
There's some complications.
There's plenty of complications. That's one of the complications.
It's a, that's a question that we run into a lot when we go to permit these projects and we get in front of a county or a city for a public hearing and people come to comment and ask questions. And again, taking agricultural land out of production versus putting it on a landfill or a commercial site.
Brownfield.
Yeah,
anything like that,
it's a very nice thought. However, the project economics play into it. To put on top of a landfill, you can't do driven pile because landfills are capped. You have to do ballasted systems, which raise the project cost significantly. Same with commercial land. Commercial or industrially zoned land has a cost per acre much, much higher than open agricultural land. So in a lot of cases, it's a really nice thought to use more blighted land for these types of projects. However, the increase in cost can often mean that you can't do the project at all. And so oftentimes it becomes a question of use land such as this or don't do solar at all.
How much area is this?
The site is 20 acres and the project itself uses about 14 acres.
Considering how many different panels and the large number of arrays that you have the combiner boxes you have remote monitoring to manage all that, or do you?
Yeah, we have a full monitoring suite that gives us data down to the combiner box level, voltage and amperage. The inverters are spit out just more data than you could possibly imagine. We've got full weather suite, cameras on site. We're tied into both our own set of CTs and PTs for revenue grade monitoring, but we also get data from Excel's meter. And the whole system communicates back to us over cellular communications network. So we get full real-time data from the solar project 24 hours a day.
Proprietary software or off the shelf?
I probably can't mention the exact manufacturer we selected, but it's a very popular system that's available to anyone.
It is off the shelf, yeah.
Off the shelf, it's not custom designed for this project.
Is that finished ground surface?
No. This picture was taken shortly after construction reached substantial completion in early December. The site has since been seeded with a kind of a low-growing, slow-growing native seed mix, and it's just now starting to come in kind of in a thick way. And we're actually waiting a little bit longer for it to come in to get some nice aerials of the site because it'll be totally green.
Under the array too?
What's that?
Under the array too?
Yeah, obviously there's going to be shading issues, so probably at the center of the array, it'll probably stick to dirt, but the majority of the site will be covered with vegetation.
And all these rows are about 2 feet off the ground. This low edge is 2 feet above grade. So the seed mixture used on site is not anticipated to grow much higher than that. Obviously, we can't control every single seed that goes in the ground, but the objective is to get a nice native planting in there that helps prevent erosion, but also doesn't do any shading.
I think you call it no-mow grass.
Sure, yeah.
That's it.
It's not just necessarily grass, but yeah.
No-mow grass.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, kind of Jack, question for you. Two questions really. One is, what kind of reaction was in that community? I mean, were they excited or was it just another thing? And then the other thing I was going to ask you, kind of related to, I remember talking to you and some other people up at the St. John's project that you guys did. There was an issue about water coming off the panels and all that. And was that an issue at all up in the slate project?
You can take the first one, I'll take the second one.
Sure. The community was very open to the project during the permitting phase. A lot of people showed up at the public hearing for the CUP, had a lot of questions, but no one really seemed to be opposed to the project. The community, permitting processes in rural communities tends to be a lot more straightforward than, like some of the counties out in California or something like that. So the process was pretty painless and the community was very supportive. Since then, there have been a lot of interest from local groups out there and questions, and so we're going to be going down next month to kind of have a tour day for a number of different community groups to come out and check it out. We can't get down there a lot because it is kind of a haul from here, but the community has, I think, really accepted it. We haven't had anything that I'm aware of where someone has thought it was a bad thing. In fact, probably the most comments that we received, and this is a credit to Blattner, was how impressed the community was with the professionalism of the construction crew during construction, that it wasn't an eyesore, it wasn't a negative impact, there wasn't a lot of noise or trash flying around, not a lot of extra traffic because the crews were so small. So ultimately, I think it was a very positive experience.
I can say anecdotally as well, I was down there a couple times myself to do commissioning projects, and whenever we would go into town to get coffee or to get some lunch, and told people we were helping on the solar project, everyone was very appreciative of, say, the people from Blattner who came and got lunch at their coffee place and things like that. So that is certainly a good added value as well. To respond to your question about stormwater, part of Westwood's job was to do a stormwater permitting, a stormwater pollution prevention plan. So one of the issues, which I think you're alluding to, Doug, is the permeability of these solar racks and whether they're considered to be permeable or impermeable, which has an effect on how the project is permitted and the kind of erosion prevention plan that you need to put in. And I believe out here, do you remember whether they're considered permanent? The problem is that it literally changes from county to county or city to city. So and not just in Minnesota, I mean across the country. You know, how the inspector treats the facility can vary greatly. And I believe here at this project, it was considered an impermeable surface, which means that the permitting office believed that water falling down would run off on both sides of the module, as opposed to going where it technically should have been going, which is straight down, is blocked by the module. So that involves some extra erosion work.
Right. Just to add to that just a little bit real quick, we did have to assign a certain percentage of surface to impermeable here, but we were able to work with the county and with Westwood's help doing some calculations showing that, well, if rain falls and hits the solar module, it's going to be diverted, which is the main question with stormwater runoff. But it's only going to be diverted to here or to here. And because there are so many breaks along the way, so much space between the rows, the total effect is not going to be an increase of stormwater runoff from off the site. The big concern is a lot of extra water going to be coming off the site onto other properties. And the answer here is no. We were also able to show that because this site was being used for agricultural purposes and being tilled and kept, you know, weed and vegetation free throughout the year, a significant amount of this property was bare soil year round. And we're coming in, we're covering the entire site in vegetation. The stormwater performance is actually better now than it was under agricultural conditions. Pick one.
Quick question here. So your general contractor was from out of state?
No, from St. Cloud.
Or from St. Cloud?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that one of the goals of the project was to study solar as a compared to wind and how if there's any synergy. So what are your findings? Is there synergies there? And what is the vision of this project? Is this going to be a model for future projects, you know, in the future? And also, is this also fulfilling Excel's renewable portfolio standards? Is that also a driver?
Yes, it does count towards the RPS. As far as the data on the solar versus wind, the project's only been in operation for 6 months, so it's kind of a long-term data gathering type of thing. Excel will have access to the solar power production profile. I'll be able to use it to look closer at that synergy. Based upon computer simulations you can do, which tend to be fairly accurate these days on wind or the solar side. It does look like there is a noticeable synergy at certain times of the year when wind isn't performing as well. Solar is going to be at its peak, and vice versa in the winter months. So we're looking forward to validating that.
How much wind will they withstand on the panels now?
You mean for the panels shatter, or you're talking about uplift?
Like a windstorm or tornadoes coming through, I mean, is there any estimate on how much they can,
The
windy area?
The racks themselves are meant to withstand 90-mile-per-hour winds. I don't know about the uplift force itself in particular, but the modules themselves can resist hail. I believe it's up to, Daryl probably knows, probably 120 miles per hour or something like that. Yeah.
What are some of the maximum wind gusts that they've had down there that you know?
Well, it's in the 90-mile-an-hour wind contour, which means that 90 miles an hour would be the maximum under, like a non-tornado.
It's right on the edge then as far as.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I was just mentioning to this gentleman here, knows a lot about electrical engineering.
Yeah.
I noticed on your panels, they're all put together nice and tight.
Huh?
Are there any gaps in between? I was looking for wind to
Right.
escape. I was looking for wind.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
Wind that is hitting at the bottom of the panel, the lifting wind.
Right.
Yeah.
Escape between the panels?
No, it's a very minute gap, so I wouldn't expect it has too much of an effect on
The one
that.
in St. Cloud, the St. John's one?
Yes.
A lot of gaps.
Yes, the gap.
I've been to that facility.
Yeah,
In
I-
that solar panel design, there's a lot of gaps
Yes.
between the panels.
Yeah, I helped design that. The gaps between the modules there are about an inch, actually. Yeah, and there's a drive line down the middle, And that's about 7 feet wide. Yeah.
Let's get back to this side of the room. I think we've had a lot of people waiting patiently. Gentlemen back there.
What's the lifespan of the array, the time, the EPA, and the warranty on the modules?
Sure, sure. I believe it's public that the PPA is for a period of 20 years with Excel. A lot of the commercial scale solar equipment, such as the stuff we've used, often has warranties in the neighborhood of 25 years. And the equipment can have a useful life beyond that. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the current generation of solar modules and solar equipment, we just hasn't been in the field that long. But and there is a degradation each year. Each year, the solar panels make a little less. But you know, the idea is that past 20, 25 years, these things could still be going and still be making a good amount of power.
So what happens after the PPA ends and these are still producing now?
It's hard to say. The owner could either choose to decommission the project at that time, or could potentially reapproach the utility and say, hey, got a project out here that's now been fully paid off. Would you be interested in a new PPA for a significantly reduced rate?
Are you using the pace of 10 years?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Using pace?
This project would not be eligible for PACE.
Yeah.
Which module manufacturer did you use, and did they provide a warranty to?
Gotcha. Unfortunately, I'm just going to keep our equipment selections confidential, but they do have a very standard warranty, 25 years, which is going to be pretty much the standard for utility scale solar modules.
For the performance?
Yeah.
Exactly.
How much did it give?
Again, it's very standard towards all the major manufacturers. You're going to be down to about 80% by the 20th year.
Comment on the ongoing maintenance. Is that a dusty area? Do you have cleaning plans?
Sure.
How do you keep it up?
Sure. The nice thing about these kinds of projects, kind of once you get the initial kinks worked out after construction, is that unless anything catastrophic happens, they do a great job of just kind of sitting there, quietly doing their job. There's a number of annual preventative maintenance tasks. We have a company under contract to provide that. We've also got somebody local that can respond to, if something blows up or trips or something. As far as the cleaning question, we do anticipate cleaning once a year. The dusty season is going to be during planting and harvesting time. And so if that needs to go to twice a year, we can certainly do that. But we're anticipating once a year in this area. Some much more dusty areas, you need to do it more like 2 or 3 times a year.
So do you just use trucks for that, or?
Just water trucks, yeah. Rich, did you have a question?
Yeah, one is, kind of go back to the community. How does this size match Slayton's energy load? Do we think we have one community off the grid in essence?
I don't believe so. Slayton's definitely larger than 240 homes. We don't have data from Excel on what the usage of that substation is, but we're definitely not all the way there. Nor would I think Excel particularly care for that type of scenario, because solar is obviously an intermittent resource. They're not going, they're probably going to want just a portion feeding into the substation rather than the entire demand.
If I can follow up, either you can go back to the slide of the estimated kilowatt hours, or you've got it on top of your head.
Sure, it's about 2,800 megawatt hours a year in that neighborhood.
There are some questions about wind. I assume, but maybe wrongly, that you are required by the building permit to get structural engineering on wind loading.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's not an issue then. You figured that out. That's good.
Absolutely. Westwood did a great job and designed it to code.
Were the panels made in the U.S., and I'm hearing that there are some newer creative films that can add strength to glass. And I'm also wondering, is there any type of a performance assurity bond, so in case the manufacturer goes bankrupt, where do you guys go for reclaiming?
Sure. I think the country of origin probably got to keep that proprietary, but almost all warranties in the solar module manufacturers providing warranty in the commercial utility scale market are backed by, there's a couple different warranty backers out there that provide third-party support. And you often need that for a particular bank to be interested in financing the project long term.
How about films?
I don't know much about that, to be honest. The manufacturers design their glass surface to be able to withstand, the rated forces. But I don't know specific films that may be used in that.
Are you referring to a silicon energy kind of a thing, or?
Well, both that, and I'm also just thinking that in different areas, you've got film you can put over commercial glass, so when hurricane, the glass stands up to more resistance. And I'm wondering if people are considering that as a benefit.
Boy, not that I've heard, and we've done some projects in hurricane zones, and I've not heard of anything like that necessarily.
Our speaker last month said that he had a problem with squirrels in his home rooftop panels. Any problem with wildlife interaction on these?
No, not that we've seen so far. One thing that we've heard is that birds can kind of like to make nests behind the racking. And so sometimes your O&M guys either need to determine, well, is this a problem or can we just let it be? And that's kind of a judgment call. But as far as wildlife elsewhere, there's really not much of anywhere for them to go.
What the guys last month said, apparently squirrels are attracted to sweetness in the wiring. That's what he said.
Interesting.
They're trying to what?
Apparently there's something in the wire that...
Oh, yes.
Sweet for squirrels.
I've heard that they for some reason, something about insulation insulation to them has kind of a sweet flavor, and I don't really understand that. But no, I have heard that before. You're right. But the nice thing about what we used here was that we used not just standard like USC wire or RHW, but we used PV wire, which has basically double insulation. So all the exposed wire is doubly insulated, and then all the collection wire is all underground. So, yeah.
Okay. Two questions. One, you may not be able to give the exact amount of PPA, but I'm assuming it's in typical avoided cost range.
Yeah, I probably really, unfortunately, I'm sorry. I appreciate the question.
I thought, even if you couldn't give the exact amount, you could talk about the range.
Right.
You'd still be able, if you can't. The second question, hopefully you can answer that. To what extent has the new legislation that just got passed intrigued your company and opened up the possibility for large, either utility scale or modest scale distribution infill systems like this?
Sure. I don't think we really know yet. It's definitely an interesting step forward. It creates a goal for the utilities to get to. But what we don't have yet, the piece of the puzzle we're missing, is what kind of programs are the utilities going to put in place to get there. The utilities could come out and say, well, we're only interested in getting there through rooftop or commercial programs. So we're going to kind of wait and see how the utilities in the state are going to design programs to get to their goal, and whether or not there's going to be interest or programs created to allow for larger scale projects. We're optimistic.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by some of the secrecy around this. The financial stuff I totally understand. But given that what's on the ground is not a proprietary configuration, it's standard technology, and we're, as an organization, trying to develop the industry, what's the background for that secrecy about where the panels come from?
Well, I just think a lot of the information really does come back to financials. Different brands of equipment have different
pricing won't be revealed by what panel is there.
Well, I think I just chalk it up to a company decision and leave it at that.
If you want to know, I'll tell you after.
Jan.
I was wondering if you got who is there, though? Is there public or groups?
Not really, and the reason is because it's in Slayton and we don't have staff in Slayton. As I mentioned, we are going down in July to host a number of community groups from the Slayton area. We kept getting phone calls about, hey, can you give us a tour? Can you give us a tour? And we were like, no, we can't do an 8-hour round trip just to give a 30-minute tour. It's just, but we got enough of them that we did contact someone with Murray County and say, hey, can you contact these groups who are interested, see if they can all pick one day where we can go down and host a number. I don't see us doing a lot of that. We want to do it as much as we can, but it's as a private developer, we don't sell a product, we don't sell a service, and we have a limited amount of resources to spend. So, absolutely.
If you're going to do one in the future, would you consider that?
Absolutely. In fact, you know, if we're going to be down there, I'll contact you guys and let you know the date, and maybe it could work out because we're going to be down there for that anyway in July.
Just let Doug know.
Sure thing.
If you want to see Westwood's handiwork, because we're selling our engineering services, I'll sneak in. Yeah.
So, could you walk us through the history of this project? Did this originate with Excel, putting an RFP, or did you guys promote, or did somebody make a proposal with Excel? Very beginning of this, walking up to the, and then in broad strokes, the arrangement of the finance, you have to talk about particularly.
Sure. The project came to life a number of years ago when Excel released its first RFP for RDF proposals. It's kind of first round of RDF grants. And the idea of this project was proposed to Excel at that time and was approved for the RDF grant, which kind of set the wheels in motion to say, hey, there's a base here, and so let's go find a site. Let's get it permitted. Let's get the financing lined up. Let's design it. Let's build it. Let's operate it. Now, the amount of time, I believe the RDF grant was awarded back in 2008 or 2009, and there wasn't a whole lot of forward progress initially because the project was pitched as part of a wind farm that was going to be built, and that wind farm never made it across the finish line. And so once that wind farm kind of ran out of steam, the proposal was modified to say, well, let's just get it into wind farm country, and that should be good enough to get the data we need. As far as the long-term financing, again, I don't have a lot of details on this just because it's not my area, but I understand that it's there's some working with a bank for kind of debt financing similar to the mortgage of a home is kind of my understanding. So I wish I had more information about that.
You don't know if you bundle up investors or something like that yourself, just a bank deal.
I guess I just don't have enough visibility into those particular details to be able to answer very clearly. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Do you have production estimates by season?
Yeah, the simulation software we use can drill it down to 24 by 365. It's obviously based upon historical weather data, so it's all done on averages. But we do have a production curve that we can drill down to a particular hour on over a long period what you could expect from this project.
Well, because in the winter it's going to produce less.
Yeah.
Southern states would be a better place to do it.
Not necessarily. There's definitely a lot of logic to that. When you look at the insulation maps for what kind of solar resources are available, a lot of the southern states in this country have a worse annual solar resource than Minnesota. Our high latitude, we get a lot of clear days in the winter, and when it's cold, this system's performing at its best.
Or even better.
Yeah, exactly.
But adapted to a place with similar solar sun, how much less is this?
I guess I don't know enough about the numbers to really answer that. But the winter obviously takes its toll. The system's not going to perform as well as if it was in California or Arizona. But you take that into account when designing the project and coming to a cost and PPA package that makes it work.
Are you saying a system that was in this latitude but had no snow by comparison, or?
Well, we could go through sun charts and stuff and figure it out.
Yeah.
But obviously, there's less produced in the winter.
Right.
And there are, like Texas is almost comparable to us.
Parts of Texas, yeah. Yeah.
Did you get a picture on the May storm?
The big storm they had down there? Yeah, we pulled some off the camera down there. I mean, just huge piles of snow.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
But it's very interesting, and this is one thing we didn't know going into it. We had our guesses, but we didn't know until we got it, how well this performs with snow. The snow comes off so quickly, partially because of the 35-degree angle, the surface materials of the modules, and also the fact that once they even start getting a little bit of light coming through that snow, the panels start heating up. The snow clears off and ice incredibly quickly, and we were very, very impressed with that.
Another question I can answer for that gentleman back there. You should always remember that we have, the solar radiance thing, you probably know that. For us, it's 4.76. It's so many kilowatt hours produced on 1 meter squared on 1 day. That's the unit of measurement. That's all fine. Now remember this one. We get the same 4.76 as Houston and Miami. Houston, you'll probably not a big deal. The moment you hear Miami, you'll say, oh my God. So we get same as Miami. So in fact, our winter below, 10 below that we all love as Minnesotans, bright sunny day, is better than Phoenix.
Yeah.
In Phoenix, they have to throw water on top of it to keep it cool. So,
Doug?
Was Venus consideration, I know like, again, St. John's has got the tracking. Was there ever a consideration of doing tracking here or the financials just as much?
Sure. That one I can answer. We looked at it, and for the particular conditions at the time, we figured the fixed was a better option for the performance of the project. And I don't think this is giving too much away. The tracker projects have I think, theoretical ability to perform a little bit better, but they also add a much more complex element to the operations and maintenance of the project. Now, I think a lot of the tracker systems available out there are designed very well, and we're using them on some projects in other parts of the country. But for this one, if the financial performance is almost a wash, there's a tendency you want to lean toward the simpler choice. And for this project, it was the fixed tilt rack.
What's the inter-row spacing that you use?
It's about 25 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More.
Looks like more than you need. Did you optimize the inter-row spacing? Or
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
It's optimized for zero shading, 9 to 3 on the winter solstice. Yeah. So because we had kind of the room to play with, normally we might go 10 to 2 or even narrower with our optimization, but we had plenty of room to play around with, so we opted to space it out a little bit, give it a little more production.
Well, what time period of the year?
9 to 3 on the winter solstice.
That's in the wintertime right there.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That's mid-December.
January or December? Or?
Late December.
Yeah.
Okay, you can see that the shadow still isn't hitting the next row back.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
It's close to
that's-
noon. It's about, about 11, it's not quite 11:50.
I remember what time I took that picture. Don? I'm sorry. They are, directly south.
We're going to take one more question, that's it.
We've had a couple questions. There's a gentleman over there who've got a question from.
Okay.
So we can chat after.
Real quickly, I didn't miss this in the slides up front, sorry. Site selection overall, how did the interconnect play? Because in wind turbines, you got a lot of power to get out in a quick way, so you go, I need a major line to get out. Do you have that in this site? Is that why you picked this site? And did you pay for that? Because in wind turbines, that allocation is discussed, let's say it that way. And in most cases, you pay.
Right.
Now, that's changed.
It was a little bit less sophisticated than that. Again, more of a question of identifying communities that had a substation, going down looking at the physical size of the lines. At that time, Excel did not make available their load and capacity data on a circuit level. And so it was kind of a matter of submitting IAs on a number of sites and seeing what we got. Some communities, like out in California, PG&E, SC&E, they make that data publicly available on a nice mapping tool. You can go into the circuit level and say, hey, on this line, there's this much demand, there's this much extra capacity. This would be a nice place for solar. We'd love to see something like that in Minnesota, but it's not made available currently.
Yeah.